On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Curtis Franco and Mr. Brian Chee here today. Now, the U.S. government continues to try to find ways to protect themselves in the cyber world. Now, they recent move, they have a policy change to enforce zero trust. Now, it's a step forward. The question is it enough? Well, network perimeters have changed over the last several years. That means network perimeter hygiene is paramount. Now, today we have Chris Haas. He's the Director of Information Security and Research at Automox. And we're going to talk all about how organizations should be handling the new norm and how they can ensure health of their endpoints. Definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 484, recorded March 11th, 2022. Less risky business. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Progress. Progress has the technology you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, network, and processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit. And by IT Pro TV. Give your team an engaging IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise. Make sure to mention Enterprise 30 to your designated IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. And by Linode. With Linode, there's no hidden fees and you can scale up or down without penalty. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/TWiT. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with our expert in enterprise and security. He's a senior analyst at Omdia, and he's Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how is your week treating you?
Oh, it's been a pretty good week, Lou. Thanks very much. Obviously, lots going on in the world to keep us busy. And on a personal note, I got to go and teach a bunch of directors of boys clubs and girls clubs how to solder this afternoon. We got a bunch of electronic projects they're going to be doing with their young people over the next few months. So that was a good thing to be involved with. And there's nothing quite like the smell of solder fumes to launch you into the weekend.
Indeed, I agree. Now you've been working a lot on cybersecurity awareness training too, right? How's that coming along?
Coming along pretty well. We are talking to most of the major players in the field. We've got interviews going on. They're doing a lot of survey results for us. And so we are building our base for the research product that we're going to have out before Blackout. So it's a good thing. And speaking of conferences, I have to say I'm now planning to spend a little time over at Enterprise Connect, which is happening here in Orlando in a couple of weeks. If any of the TWiT Ride is going to be there, hit me up. I'll give you the Twitter handle at the end of the show, and would love to see you there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Curtis. Thanks for being here. Well, speaking of experts, we have our network expert and all-around tech geek as well. He's a net architect at Sky Fiber, and he's back. He's Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, great to see you, my friend. What have you been up to?
Actually, I finally unburied my Blackmagic ATEM Mini, and that's actually over here. That's actually a lithium-ion battery, which is on a UPS board, which has a 4-inch touchscreen. And that's going to become my Speedify machine. I got to go build a case for it so it looks nice. So I'm having fun. The ATM Mini is one of those things. I'm actually going to, Curt and I are tinkering with doing a either weekly or every other week podcast for our makerspace. So it'll be fun.
Very cool. You get all the toys, all the fun toys. I need to get some of those toys myself. Well, you know what? It's been quite a busy week in the enterprise, so we definitely should get started. Now, the U.S. government continues to try to find ways to protect themselves in the cyber world. Now, the White House actually recently required a federal agencies to actually achieve zero trust architecture using, it's a pretty interesting step forward, if you ask me. But the question is it enough for all the agencies out there? Now, network perimeters have changed over the last several years. Now, they've extended all the way to people's homes. Now, that means that network perimeter hygiene is paramount to ensure the success of a business. Now, today we have Chris Haas on the show. He's Director of Information Security and Research at Automox. And we're going to talk about how organizations are handling the new norm and just what they can do to ensure healthy endpoints. So stick around. Lots more to talk about later. But before we do have to jump into this week's news blips. Security experts have spotted an interesting case of suspected ransomware attack that employed custom-made tools typically used by APTs, or advanced persistent threat groups. Now, although the client was not revealed in this, they were mentioned in the gambling and gaming industry. Now, the attack provided some interesting details regarding the tools being used. Although no concrete connection between the groups have been uncovered, the operation tactics, targeting scope, and malware customization capabilities signify a potential connection. In fact, the tools I'm about to mention have been used by numerous adversaries like Mimikatz, SoftPerfect, and Cobalt Strike. Now, the tools were a mix of custom-made and available open-source tools. The most notable cases are a modified version of Legolo, a reverse tunneling utility that's freely available for presenters and pen testers on GitHub, and a custom tool to dump credentials from LSAS. Now, the attack unfolded over a weekend evening and followed by rapid development showcasing the actor's skills and red teaming knowledge. Now, the initial access came through a compromised employee's SSL VPN credentials, followed by admin scans and an RDP brute force, and then a credential harvesting effort came after that. Now, the subsequent steps involved accessing additional machines with high privileges and the deployment of a custom proxying tunneling for secure communication, and finally, the dropping of Cobalt Strike. Now, that's when the threat actor was stopped, but they left their payloads behind to take a closer look at them. Now, my thinking here is pay less attention to the tools here and more about the fact that the hackers will use any means necessary to build a tool that will get them what they want. But the tactics to get in the front door and drop these payloads on these machines is quite common. So pay attention to your endpoint security and ensure the simple password won't be the fall of your empire.
Well, the FBI issued a warning this week that the Ragnar Locker ransomware has infected some 52 organizations in manufacturing, energy, financial services, government, and information technology so far in 2022. In the new FBI flash alert, the Bureau updated and added new indicators of compromise for Ragnar Locker beyond the ones it first published in 2020. Ragnar Locker ransomware actors work as part of a ransomware family, frequently changing obfuscation techniques to avoid detection and prevention, the FBI alert stated. Ragnar Locker previously has been seen adding distributed DDoS attacks to put additional pressure on victims to pay its ransom demands. Now, notably, Ragnar Locker is very specific about where it does not want to attack victims. According to the FBI, Ragnar Locker uses Windows API getLocaleInfoW to identify the location of the infected machine. If the victim location is identified as Azerbaijani, Armenian, Belarusian, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Moldavian, Tajik, Russian, Turkmen, Uzbek, Ukrainian, or Georgian, the process terminates. Ragnar Locker also checks for current infections to prevent multiple transform encryptions of the data, potentially corrupting it. Finally, instead of choosing which files to encrypt, Ragnar Locker chooses which folders it will not encrypt. Taking this approach allows the computer to continue to operate normally while the malware encrypts files with known and unknown extensions containing data of value to the victim.
So complex systems are hard to secure. As computing environments complexity grows, they become less secure and more vulnerable over time. Well, in this dark reading article, he demonstrates how security is tied to complexity, why increasing complexity of cloud computing environments is inevitable, and the pitfalls of common coping strategies. Well, single sign-on, aka SSO, is wonderful for reducing complexity, but it does add an all your eggs in one basket scenario for organizations. What we as an industry really need to consider are listed by the author. 1, you can't just secure the perimeter. Not anymore. Once in, the bad guys have access to the entire kingdom. 2, stop sharing credentials. Darn it. Make sure individual credentials are removed when people leave. And number 3, too many manual processes means the bureaucracy can get in the way of all kinds of things. Frustration with slow or complex procedures means your people are going to get frustrated, or worse, look for workarounds. Well, we as an industry need to move towards zero trust, and moving to some sort of passwordless scenario is looking more and more like the eventual solution. If there are any hard lessons to be learned from this pandemic, is that we as an industry need to pay attention to how non-IT folks want to do their work and leverage our technology to simplify zero trust security so that it doesn't get in the way of doing business.
Now, as Eastern Europe events continue to unfold, more and more sanctions are being imposed on Russia. In fact, recently the sanctions imposed by Western companies and governments are preventing Russian sites from renewing their existing TLS certificates. In fact, that's causing browsers to block access to sites with expired certificates. Now, we know that TLS certificates help the browser confirm that a domain belongs to a verified entity, and that exchange of information between the user and the server is encrypted. Now, modern versions of browsers actually enforce encrypted web traffic. Now, signing authorities based on countries that have imposed sanctions on Russia can no longer accept payments for their services, leaving many sites with no practical means to actually renew their expiring certificates. Now, that means most people won't be able to browse to their pages. Unfortunately, the Russian state has come up with a solution to this, and that is to become a domestic certificate authority for the independent issuing and renewal of TLS certificates. Now, in their eyes, it will replace the foreign security certificate if it's revoked or expires, and the Ministry of Digital Development will provide a free domestic analog to that. Now, the service is provided to any legal entities that are out there. Now, the only saving grace here is that for a new certificate authority to be trusted by web browsers, they first need to be vetted by various companies, which can take a very long time. Now, currently, the only web browsers that recognize Russia's new CA as trustworthy here are the Russian-based Yandex browser and Atom products. So Russian users are told to actually use those browsers instead. Now, users of other browsers like Chrome or Firefox can manually add the new Russian root certificate to continue to use Russian sites that feature the state-issued certificate. Now, that will actually allow state actors to perform man-in-the-middle attacks, so it's definitely not recommended. Now, certificate authorities are supposed to be universally trusted. However, as the Russian entity here is not currently enjoying any level of trust, it's unlikely for the major browser vendors to add them as root certificate stores. Now, that means users from the rest of the world will not be getting to any Russian-hosted sites anytime soon. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Progress. Now, some of my favorite development tools are actually Progress Telerik tools. I've used them for many, many years. In fact, Fiddler is one of my favorites. I use it almost every day. Progress is a fantastic company. They've been enabling enterprise experiences for decades and has assembled the technologies that will empower businesses to thrive in a post-COVID world. Now, most companies don't have the resources to invest in technology as digital Goliaths. They need to use technology to create differentiation with a smaller investment. Now, they can achieve this by turning to Progress as their trusted provider. Now, with Progress, any organization can achieve the level of differentiation that's critical in today's business environment. Now, whether you're an IT professional concerned about networking and infrastructure, security and compliance, or enabling web and digital experiences, Progress has a solution for you. Now, MoveIt is a really great solution. It's a managed file transfers. It provides control, security, and visibility over all file transfer activities. Transferring confidential data through insecure channels opens your organization up to liabilities. We know this. Now, with a managed file transfer solution like this one, you can gain insight into all who has access to your files. In fact, if the file was even accessed and when. Now, they also have WhatsUp Gold network monitoring. Now, this allows you to monitor your networks, your applications, and your devices both in the cloud and on premises. And they also have Kemp LoadMaster load balancer. And this is a next generation load balancing tool and application delivery solution for private, public, and hybrid clouds. In fact, they also have Flowmon Network Intelligence, and it's a network performance monitoring and network detection and response solutions. Really great solution. And they also have Sitefinity digital experience platform and build digital experiences across channels that improve business agility and foster personal relationships with visitors. Now, Progress has the technology you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, network, and processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit. Don't miss out. Visit progress.com/twit for your very own Progress swag bag. And we thank Progress for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time for the bites. Now, this first bite's very interesting. It's going to segue very, very well into our guest segment as well, because between vulnerabilities caused by remote work during the pandemic and cyber attacks are being more frequent than ever, and an aggressive and innovative approach to addressing cybersecurity and cyber risk, we need more. We need more here. And the White House's recent requirement for federal agencies to achieve a zero trust architecture is a great first step to all of this. But we all know that cyber protection is a journey, right? And there's no turnkey solution. Now, zero trust, we all have heard this before. It's a set of design principles. It's coordinated with cybersecurity and system management strategies. Now, these are based on the acknowledgement that threats exist both inside and outside traditional network boundaries. Now, the zero trust requirement from the federal government is part of the current administration's cyber plan, is directed at federal agencies. However, state and local governments need to understand that one size does not fit all here. Now, zero trust isn't a program to install, but rather an approach where no user or device or application operating in or out of the security perimeter is trusted. We know that. Now, this means you must verify everything to attempting to actually establish access and minimize access to what's needed through a combination of different technologies and policies. Now, for example, zero trust would treat access requests from devices on known and unknown networks the same, subjecting them both to the same security requirements and policies. Now, this is in a contrast to the traditional security approach, right, where the firewall actually establishes a perimeter but gives a broad access to everything that gets inside it. Now, the pandemic has highlighted the need for zero trust because of the shift to the remote workforce. Now, the network perimeter has been extended to infect people's home networks. Now, since cyber threats are on the rise, state and local governments should care to implement zero trust as well. Now, implementing zero trust requires a large number of steps. There's, again, no turnkey solution here. And there's some of them are around best practices that have been provided by the federal organizations to move forward. Now, the White House's requirement follows the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency model, CISA model, where without clear guidance, though, local leaders don't really know what they're supposed to do here. In fact, they might be able to use best practices to work them forward, but where do they begin? So I'm going to bring my co-host back in because there is a lot going on here. We know that zero trust is a working model. It's a great model. But Curtis, I want to throw this to you first. State and local governments are not required to do this, but they have a smaller budget than the federal government, right? And the question is, what's the likelihood that they're going to go and move this forward, that they're going to take their own initiative here and actually start implementing this?
I suspect that what we're going to see is state and local governments implementing it in departments as they go through a refresh cycle. I can't frankly imagine any state, or for that matter, any municipality, that has a budget that's going to allow them to just go full bore zero trust on their entire network infrastructure at one fell swoop. Instead, we're going to see it, coming in piecemeal. Likely, places like the revenue gathering arms of government or law enforcement first. You're absolutely right. This is something that we know governments need to do, and in places like the state where I live, Florida, we have seen local governments be hit by ransomware. So we know that local governments are not immune to attack. So it's time to start planning for this and for them to begin to get ready to make the step into zero trust as budget and refresh cycles allow.
I agree. Now, another thing that kind of goes along with this is the fact that there's no one size fits all. There is no turnkey solution to all of this. We all know that. There's a bunch of best practices and guidance. But the thing is here, based off of different budgets, based off of different availability of tools and practices here, it can be challenging. So, Chee, I want to throw this to you. Obviously, there is no turnkey solution here. Is best practices going to be enough for like local organizations, local federal, local governments to actually go and implement this? Obviously, because of the heterogeneous nature of just environments in general.
Oh, I really doubt it. It's going to definitely come out to be carrot and a stick type of thing. I was very engrossed with trying to implement standards with some friends over at DISA when I was working on a lot of classified systems. When I left the federal government, went to work in the at the University of Hawaii when we had all kinds of different research. Now, the problem is in classified research, setting standards is pretty easy. There's a set of standards called the NISPOM Chapter 8, and that sets out mandatory requirements. You actually cannot get certified to work on classified material unless you can demonstrate in person to DISA staff in an audit. Now, the private sector doesn't have quite that kind of stick. The closest I've seen is actually Hipaa and PCI. So Hipaa for the medical side, PCI for credit cards. Well, those kind of standards are great, but they've big giant holes in them. And the holes are basically talking about goals, maybe some, like protect the patient information. There's no real hard verbiage or suggestions even on how you achieve that. All it has created is a nice big fat market for consultants to make a lot of money off people to interpret very loose guidance. So realistically, I think what we really need is we need the federal government to make some stronger suggestions and work with state and county types of people. The Federal Bureau of Investigation actually has a group called InfraGard that is uniquely positioned to work with the civilian population, civilian business population, on perhaps hammering out some stronger suggestions. I think that's something that needs to get done, because unless someone has motivation to affect the bottom line, because if you're adding expenses, you're affecting the bottom line, a lot of people aren't going to do it unless there's some sort of motivation. So again, it comes down to carrot and a stick. We'll see what happens. I hope something happens, but I'm not holding my breath.
I agree. I think the interesting thing that you pointed out, obviously having stronger recommendations or even some policies could be interesting. I think that kind of goes back to the fact that obviously local and state governments, they don't have infinite budgets or large budgets that could just go change very easily. Curt, I want to throw this to you. You work with you talk with a lot of organizations, you work with a lot of organizations. What about an incremental approach here? Now, we've heard this stat before. In fact, this is from Microsoft where I work, but the use of multi-factor authentication alone can block more than 99.9% of account compromise attacks. Now, what if local governments, state governments who don't have big budgets, organizations that are small, start with more of an incremental approach, like implementing MFA, that kind of thing?
Well, obviously, doing anything is far superior to doing nothing. And MFA is a really good place to start. With that said, we all have to recognize that there are bad ways to implement MFA. There are some implementations with known issues. And unfortunately, especially smaller civic governments, where the budgets are stretched and the expertise of the personnel might not be what it could be in a larger organization, they are susceptible to putting together less secure implementations of even more secure practices. So let's say, yes, do something. Multi-factor authentication is a good place to start. Enforcing password and authentication policies is a good place to start. Enforcing rules regarding updates is a good place to start. All of these are the sort of things that you can do without a dramatic re-architecting of either the network or the application delivery infrastructure. And so these are the places where I would start. Leave the bigger things that could have more of an impact to the next time some big juicy grant comes along.
Last question to you, Chee. I think this is the doozy of a question, because I think we all know that, again, we talked about this, zero trust is not a turnkey solution. There's a lot of technologies that can go along with it. The question is, obviously there's a skill gap here. Some organizations might not have the skills, the knowledge to go and implement any of this. Is this going to be the deciding factor whether the people move forward? Are they going to need to develop new skills? Is that really what zero trust is going to require people for organizations going forward?
I think, so I'm very opinionated on this particular topic. And the reality is there are some great certifications out there. And the fact that for network professionals, raises tend to come with getting your CCNA from, Cisco or the CCIE and so forth. Having some, a financial, having a carrot for getting trained up on cybersecurity, it's kind of weak. There are a few. I wish there were more. One of our old sponsors, IT Pro, actually, I think it's one of our current sponsors, IT Pro TV, has a great set of training videos on cybersecurity. I just don't think there's a whole lot of carrots. So I'm hoping, this is what I'm kind of hoping, that maybe our Congress critters can get this note past them saying, hey, why don't you make cybersecurity a big enough issue that go ahead and throw some tax credits at it. Make it less painful to get training. Make it less painful for the company to pay for it, or make it less painful for the individuals to pay for it. The number of times I've walked into an organization and found people that are still running perimeter security, or finding people that are still running VPNs that are based on triple DES, or even finding people that are still using, something as weak as SHA-1. It's kind of depressing. And I've gone into a couple organizations that supposedly have some financial risk out there on the internet, and they don't even know what MFA stands for. So I think maybe, just maybe, there needs to be some sort of carrot waved in front of people to get the training. We don't seem to have print magazines teaching a lot of this stuff. And truth be told, as much as I love being a podcaster, it takes a lot of time. Magazines were great because I could tear out the really cool articles and slap a staple through it and put it by my downstairs bathroom for my morning constitutional so I could catch up on what's going on in my industry. Not so easy with a podcast. So I think training is a real big deal. I think it's going to take a carrot, or maybe some sticks. Maybe have your interest rates or your insurance costs modified by the number of trained personnel you have. Something. We need carrots and sticks to get people better trained, because I think we're not doing such a great job on it. Someday, maybe.
Thanks, Cheever. We all need carrots and cupcakes or whatever to move forward. So I agree with that. Thank you. Thanks, Cheever. Well, I think that does it for that bite. We definitely want to get to the guest next. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech. And I think it's very relevant. That is IT Pro TV. Now, you may have noticed there's lots of movement in the industry these days. People are looking for the next thing that's really interesting in tech, and you may want to develop new skills for the next role, right? Well, even current IT teams need new skills and knowledge to ensure their businesses are a success. Now, where are you going to develop these skills? You need an engaging way to do it. Well, with IT Pro TV, more than 80% of users who start a video actually finish it. Now, IT Pro TV is engaging, and your team will enjoy learning on their platform. In fact, give your team the tools they need to make your business thrive. Now, courses are entertaining and binge-worthy, and keeping your team interested, invested in learning is very important, and they definitely do it well. Now, the tech industry is evolving, changing rapidly, and your team needs to be trained today. Now, when a new software is released, system upgrade, or cyber threat faces your business, IT Pro TV offers the training and perspectives of those disruptions within days, if not hours. Question is, why is IT Pro TV right for your business? Get all training and certifications for your team done all in one place. IT Pro TV has every vendor and skill you need for your IT team training. Now, they provide Microsoft IT training, Cisco training, Linux training, Apple training, security, cloud, and so much more. Over 5,800 hours more, ranging from technical skills to compliance to soft skills. You can do so much with IT Pro TV business plans. In fact, you can track your team's results, manage your seats, assign unassigned team members, and access monthly usage reports. In fact, see metrics like logins, viewing time, track completions, and more. Easily manage your teams from there as well. Manage subsets of users or teams by providing them with customized assignments, monitoring progress, and reporting on usage of the platform. In fact, assignments can be full courses or individual episodes within the course. Advanced reporting as well. Get immediate insight into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time with visual reports. Don't forget that IT Pro TV has individual plans too. Give your team the IT development platform they need to level up their skills while enjoying the journey. For teams of 2 to 1,000, volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise. Make sure you mention Enterprise 30 to your designated IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We actually get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT riot. Today we have Chris Haas. He's Director of Information Security and Research at Automox. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We're excited to have you here. Now, before we get into the meat of endpoint security here, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you take us through your journey through tech and what brought you to Automox?
Yeah, sure. So I've kind of been in security for the last 10 years. I got my start at Geek Squad way back in the day. And it's kind of an interesting story. I was triaging a customer's issue who had a browser hijack issue. And it was a fake IT scam, right? Like, make sure you pay us this money or we're going to report you to the FBI. And this lady had spent around $800 to $900 on this scam. And it really kind of hit home on how impactful it can be to the everyday user of a security incident. So after that, I graduated college. I went and worked for a smaller advertising QA company, and they had a small malware desk there because they were tracking malicious advertisements or malvertising campaigns and things like that. Spent some 2 or 3 years there. Moved on to Cylance. If everybody's familiar with Cylance, they're an endpoint protection company. Worked there for about 4 years or so. Also spent some time at DoD at Fort Meade for a little while. And spent a little bit of time as a principal research engineer at Logarithm. So a vast majority of my career has been around threat intel, threat research, malware reverse engineering, adversarial emulation. But as what I've been doing for the last 3 years here at Automox is leading their information security team and their IT teams to help protect us and protect our customers.
Fantastic. So, we've talked a little bit about this in the last couple bites and even in our blips around the fact that organizations, they are being given mandates. They need to go and move to better security, better endpoint protection, so that they can guarantee that their success is higher. They don't want to get hit with a cyber threat. They don't want to get hit with ransomware. They want to stay out of it. In fact, even the federal government we talked about recently now has a set of guidelines they have to go and follow and start implementing zero trust. Now, the question to you is, we talked a little bit about this in our bite. A lot of organizations are buried beneath a lot of different endpoint solutions out there. What's causing so much churn in this? What's causing so much delay in moving forward, other than too many tools?
I think there's too many tools. I think there's a lot of tools that haven't traditionally been built to kind of allow for a zero trust architecture. I know that's one competitive advantage for our product. I'm not here to help sell Automox, but in the IT management space, just really technology hasn't really allowed for folks to move outside of a VPN or move into a zero trust or truly zero trust architecture. So I think it's an immaturity for a lot of products and not having enough to select from. But then also having too many to select from, if that makes any sense, where it can be very difficult and complex. I know that Brian and folks talked about, the selection and complexity is really difficult for smaller organizations with smaller budgets, especially in the state and local government space. So I think it can be kind of really difficult to have the expertise in-house to make that transition, to justify that budget, and then also finding a frictionless solution or a close to frictionless solution that will benefit and users will embrace, and not to see it as a hindrance every day.
Right. So let's just talk about endpoint protection for right now, because I think we talked a little bit about zero trust, but I think if we take a step back, a lot of organizations haven't been able to implement this yet. They're trying to focus on their network perimeter, a lot of their endpoints, and ensuring that they are secure, that they are constantly staying secure, whether there's breaches and so on. What are some of the things that are causing angst and causing delay in making sure organizations are getting there and being secure? I know that I just recently read a report, the Automox report around this. There's a laundry list of stuff, but what are some of the top things in there?
I think it's, we pushed out a report not too long ago, and in that report, we found that 84% of organizations still struggle a lot with managing their endpoints. And a lot of that's because, we made this transition over the last couple of years from the pandemic, that there's a lot of folks that went to a remote, remote stance or remote workplace. And traditionally their legacy tools did not allow them to kind of move outside that perimeter, right? Everybody's connecting to a VPN. They have very limited visibility there. And not being able to kind of, track things in real time because of their endpoint monitoring capabilities didn't typically allow for that. You saw this type of kind of architecture and things in the EDR space, right? Where having continuous visibility and having continuous monitoring on behaviors or any kind of activity that's happening on the machine was incredibly critical for people to secure their endpoints. And we've seen a lot of maturity and a lot of growth within the security space, especially with the CrowdStrikes and the Silences and the SentinelOnes and Cyber Reasons of the world. And you see a lot of maturity happen there, but you haven't seen as much much attention being paid to IT orchestration tools or just general cyber hygiene tools for patching or for configuration. So that's kind of I see a next frontier for maturity.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, a lot of organizations, they lack the visibility. They lack the ability to monitor, like you were saying. And I think the one thing that I find interesting is there's a lot of tools out there, right? There's a lot of tools. Yeah. In fact, I've worked with organizations where they just have a bunch of scripts, whether they're PowerShell or whatnot, that they run randomly throughout the day to generate reports. And so they're not even automated in any way, or they've got them automated, but they're not alerts in any way. They're essentially just a pull model rather than a push model. And I think seems like that's a good place for organizations to start, don't you think? Is try to start automating things and trying to get some tools or solutions that allows them to have more of a push model when it comes to issues with their endpoints.
Yeah, absolutely. I think automation for the maturity of IT orchestration is key. And making sure that your admins are able to do that automation without having to be connected to the VPN all the time, or having a single point or location to be able to manage those automations, right? So maybe one IT admin has their own custom set of tools that they've written, like you said, with custom PowerShell scripts that they run from a daily basis to manage certain things, but they don't have any kind of idea on whether or not that was successful, or seeing if the outcome was actually executed on an endpoint. So having that visibility of what exactly is happening and being able to build automation or work chains off of that is incredibly impactful, incredibly important for, just your automation journey in general. I think that there's so much more time that we can give back to IT admins just on being able to automate the manual, mundane tasks. And that really kind of segues into that skills gap, right? Where it's difficult for folks to up-level their skills when they're stuck doing manual tasks over and over again. So being able to automate a lot of that busy work, the work that doesn't necessarily contribute to your growth in your career, can really help you help close the gap from that skills perspective.
Yeah, I agree. As an engineer, I can tell you that automation is my life. Anything that's a mundane task I don't like doing, I make sure I go and automate it every day.
Absolutely. If you do it more than once, you might as well write automation.
That's right. If you do it more than once, if you spend more than 10 minutes of your time, you should be going and automating things, let alone in security world. So I totally get that for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think the interesting thing here is we talk a lot about organizations, like motivations for them to move forward. Obviously, cyber threats are motivating enough, but a lot of organizations are just not moving forward with this. What are you seeing where organizations are doing to get motivated, or maybe providing more accountability there for them to actually move forward? What's actually pushing them forward here?
Like I said, we've talked a lot about budget, right? So one of the biggest ways for somebody to be able to push kind of this automation narrative is just really honing in on the total cost of ownership for a platform and what that can give you back from a speed of a business perspective. I know that can be kind of different depending on the industry vertical, right? But especially in our space, in the SaaS space, it's all about being agile and being able to get to be as fast as possible. And then also, right, in the startup space, you don't have a gigantic budget, so you want to make sure you're getting everything you possibly can out of that tool. So I think really being able to be data driven, be able to show the amount of time and effort and cycles that you're saving your admins and your general business units, right? Automation isn't just for automating your admin's job, but a good IT admin will be going to other business users and asking them about the problems that they may have, and then writing automation for them as well to unlock the business. So being able to have good data, good metrics to be able to track those things is incredibly important for you as a security or IT leader to be able to justify cost, right, for certain tooling, right? That's really a big part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think obviously a lot of the executives, the C-suite, they want to see the data. They want to understand what the threat is, what the potential threat is. And I agree. I think by you just utilizing the data that you already have in a more organized way, that's going to get people moving forward. I guess that brings me to my next question. Actually, I have two more before we have to jump to ad. I think the first one being reporting. Is there an easy way? Is there tooling out there, that allows IT professionals to take the data from their endpoints, whether it's, just straight logging or whatnot, to be able to produce these reports, to be able to help and assist the C-suite to understand the accountability required there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some really interesting tools you can use. Like if you're building up an elk stack or whatever SIM that you're using, we're seeing a lot of movement from solutions to be able to make an API available to ingest data into those log aggregation or log management tools. So I think that's one of the biggest ways. And then making sure that not only are you getting that data ingested, but then making sure that you're building valuable reporting. And some of the reporting that I always find the most important, right, is historical reporting. Be able to show executives or being able to show people that run your budget, whatever organization you are, that you're actually moving the needle, right? Not that you're just identifying issues or security issues within your environment, but you're actually making it better, right? So you want to make sure that you're not only gathering as much data as you possibly can, but making sure that those data points that you're gathering are impactful to everybody that's kind of looking at it. So typically we just shove everything into our SIM using most of our APIs and generating reporting that way. and build custom dashboards that our executive leadership kind of takes a look at. So that's one of the advantages of really gearing towards API driven solutions.
Yep. Now, Cheebert talked in the last part. You talked a little bit about a carrot and the stick and how we moving things forward. Now, I think organizations, they need some kind of carrot and stick to move forward here. And we just recently heard about the fact that a lot of insurance companies, the ones that are offering cyber insurance, they're starting to change their policies to have actually, ceilings to how much they pay out, and especially for ransomware and things like that. And it seems like that's going to impact these organizations to move forward. Do you feel like that's kind of the carrot and sticks that some organizations need?
Yeah, I think so. I think traditionally in the industry, we've kind of used cybersecurity as a crutch, right? I don't have to build as much of a mature or cybersecurity program or give my cybersecurity program a budget to kind of make me as secure as possible, because I have insurance that will protect me from whatever happens. Hopefully my budget or my limit is high enough to do that. And I think traditionally that has been the case, that a lot of times it was easier in the beginning to be able to get that insurance claim. But obviously, as you can tell with pretty much anything that has to do with insurance, is once they are not making as much money off of it, they're going to try to find every way possible not to make that payout. So it's really kind of helping organizations understand that they cannot just completely rely on cybersecurity insurance, and that they need to make sure that they're earmarking, resources for a security team or for a managed service provider to help, build in some adequate security controls within the organization.
Agreed. Well, when we come back, I want to bring my co-host back in because they're chomping at the bit here. I have lots of questions to ask here. But before we do, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Linode. Now, cloud services and hosting are always on an organization's mind. That means you're probably already looking at or even using Linode. But Linode offers the industry's best price to performance value for all compute instances, including shared, dedicated, high memory, and GPUs. Now, get free DDoS, cloud firewall, unfiltered API access, and much more. Linode offers predictable, flat fee pricing, which is universal across all 11 of its data centers. You might be asking, why would I choose Linode? Well, you'll get a support experience above the rest. People choose Linode because they demand a better customer support experience. Well, Linode's independence and mission drive them to a different standard here, where the customer is the driving force behind everything they do. Now, if you're worried about pricing, don't be. They have pay-as-you-go, predictable and transparent pricing. In fact, Linode pioneered this model. They pioneered the predictable flat pricing model for cloud computing. No more anxiety over those hidden costs. Now, they make it simple to launch and scale in the cloud with Linode. You'll get flat pricing across every global data center, an intuitive cloud manager, full-featured API, best-in-class documentation, and award-winning support. Linode makes it easy to manage your applications in the cloud. Now, Linode has proven secure and reliable enterprise-grade infrastructure with enterprise and extensive peering relationships and their next-generation network. Linode actually delivers the modern infrastructure and performance you need to innovate at scale. Now, I find with Linode, they are a one-stop shop, so you don't have to look anywhere else. Now, whatever you want to do, they have it. You can host your website, build your app, store or backup media. You can even easily launch and enrich your developer applications, hosted services, websites, AI and machine learning workloads, gaming services, or even CI/CD environments. Plus, you can launch and scale in the cloud with virtual machines. You can choose shared and dedicated compute instances, or you can use your $100 in credit on an S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes, and much more. Now, there are a lot of cloud providers out there that don't make it easy to use. Now, dashboards come out people's ears, not with Linode. I found them to be super easy. In fact, Linode was rated the easiest to use by G2 Crowd in 2021. That's why cloud developers choose Linode, because they make managing complex cloud infrastructure really easy with simple bundled pricing, full-featured API, and 100% human support. Linode helped pioneer cloud computing back in 2003, 3 years before AWS. So they have the longevity can be trusted. With Linode, there's no hidden fees, and you can scale up or down without penalty. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/Twiit. That's linode.com/Twiit. And we thank Linode for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Chris Haas. He's the Director of Information Security and Research at Automox about endpoint security. I do want to bring my co-host back in here. I'm going to start with Mr. Chee. Brian?
Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have you imagine, if we could have something to make the world a better place. I'm a big carrot and stick type person. Personally, I think the U.S. needs to have maybe something like GDPR. So there's penalties for being lazy or being neglectful. But I think there needs to be some carrots, like, say, some tax deductions for training your people up. I would like you to soapbox on carrots and sticks in cybersecurity.
Yeah, sure. I think that's actually a concept I haven't heard before, especially about the getting discounts in your cybersecurity coverage or getting increased limits based on having certified professionals within your organization. So I think you definitely have to have some type of carrot and stick perspective when trying to implement security controls. And I think that's a good point. Trying to have some type of regulation like GDPR or something with our new mandates or coming mandates from the government to make sure you're meeting at least your baseline security needs and things like that. And that's it. It has to be just like any other decision, as it needs to be well thought out with a clear goal in mind. And it needs to also be taken to account for businesses that maybe that don't have a budget for certain controls, right? So something that's attainable. One thing that we do every single quarter at Automox is we develop our OKRs, so our objectives and key results. And one of the things that we talk about when we're coming up with these objectives and key results for our organizational units to kind of reach for each quarter is that you don't want to set that goal. You think about it in terms of a toddler, right? When a toddler's trying to reach for something, you want them to be able to reach for something that's attainable. If you put it on maybe on a stool or something like that on the ground, it's too easy. Might not be that interested in said toy anymore. If you put it on the countertop, they'll reach for it. If you put it a little bit higher, they might reach a little bit higher. But if you put the goal on top of the refrigerator, that toddler's never ever actually going to try to get that. So that's kind of the similar approach that we would take with government, kind of government regulations. Is they have to be reasonable for those starting off organizations, or maybe that aren't really reaching that very bottom bar, something that's attainable that will help, the overall security maturity of all organizations within the United States. That has to be something that they can reach for, and it can actually achieve. If you make it too difficult, a lot of companies are just going to say, well, hell with it. I'm not going to try to even implement these things. And they're just going to accept maybe some of the fines or things that kind of happen. And also it needs to make sense for large organizations to that can kind of foot the bill from a fee standpoint. We kind of see that a little bit we've seen Facebook been fined multiple times. We've seen large organizations been fined multiple times from a GDPR standpoint. And I don't know that it actually has changed really their stance in some form or fashion, because it's not as big of a hit to them from a financial standpoint. But that small to medium businesses that are kind of getting started there can be really difficult if you set that bar too high for them.
Well, let me ask you one more soapbox question I get. Mm-hmm. I'm a big supporter of the FBI's InfraGuard program. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about a community-based sharing? Because the big guys are going to have a lot more resources than the small guys. Maybe a community. What do you think? Soapbox, please.
I think that's a good idea. I think anybody that cannot afford help, that can get free help anywhere, I think is always a good thing. I think there's no reason for organizations to reinvent the wheel. I think that as long as you have, services that are either free or next to free to give you a best idea and the best bang of your buck for where you should start off your security journey, I think that's hugely impactful. I'm a big fan of the InfraGuard kind of initiative. I think the security community probably could do something similar. as long as there's no shaming or anything like that that has to do with maybe not reaching that particular goal. So I'd be all for something where we would be a little bit more open to the community, because I think that that's where all the mentorship, all of the knowledge kind of comes from that can really help out newer organizations or organizations that have been around for a long time. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Cheebert. Well, I do want to bring Curtis back in because he's got some questions too. Curtis?
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate it. Yeah, I want to talk. We mentioned earlier the idea of insurance, and insurance deals in the language of risk. And so I'm curious if you're seeing people, using any of the risk frameworks, say FAIR or any of the others that is pushing them in a particular direction in order to try and bring those risk metrics down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely been a huge push in terms of risk reduction and using those types of frameworks. I know just in general, from us being a vendor providing kind of information about our security programs, that we've been getting a lot more just general assessments around our third-party risk management, our questionnaires or any kind of questions around, what kind of risk do you bring into my environment? And we've probably seen a 300% increase over the last 3 years in terms of folks asking more and more questions. You see more compliance or regulation standards like SOC 2 or ISO 27001 being a lot more standard within the space that really gives you that good baseline for folks to be able to reduce that risk. And then also, I've also seen a significant increase in customers that want to make sure that we actually are paying for cybersecurity insurance and what that limit is and all of the stipulations in order for them to be able to get paid in case something were to happen, right? So yeah, I would definitely see that there's been a pretty big increase there.
When you talk about the different standards, SOC 2, ISO 27001, one of the issues that I see out there is that there are so darn many ways to quantify risk. Every framework, whether it's a framework or a standard or whatever, we end up with a lot of them. Are you starting to see any trend towards these collapsing down into a way to quantify risk, or at least some sort of agreement on a way that we can talk about best practices in quantifying the risk?
I don't know if this is a reassuring answer, but I don't think I've really seen too much of seeing that reduced down from a complexity standpoint. If anything, I think it's probably increasing the more and more that we're seeing regulations for, GDPR. I know here in Texas, we've started implementing Texas RAMP and a lot of different things like that. So unfortunately, I think that the kind of way to quantify risk is only going to continue to get more and more complex as we adopt more and more frameworks for compliance or for just generally conveying risk to most folks. The formula for it is not that different. It hasn't changed really over time. The likelihood of attack and the impact of said attack, but I think that it's actually becoming more and more complex. The same as you're seeing more and more complexity to information systems, right? As we gain more and more complexity, I see more and more different ways that those could be leveraged in a malicious way, which will also kind of just grow more of complexity for quantifying that risk.
Oh, good. More complexity. That's just what we need in the industry.
Not to paint too much doom and gloom for more and more compliance regulations, but I feel that that's something that's going to be coming down the road. So organizations are going to have to make sure that they're investing heavily or investing in that to make sure that they can be within compliance of said standards and qualifying those risks for those customers, because it's becoming a lot more top of mind than it was in the past, which is a good thing.
Well, the last question that I have on this, you're in sort of a unique position to see all of these different risk metrics. And it's one thing if you are a state government, if you're a major metropolitan area, or if you're, say, part of the Fortune 1000, you have the staff and the head count to deal with the different ways of assessing risk and reporting on that risk. Have you seen any of these frameworks, methods, whatever, that might be appropriate for smaller organizations, whether they're private entities or smaller municipalities, for them to start to use something that, maybe is lower on the complexity scale, but still moves them in the right direction when it comes to being able to quantify their risk?
Yeah, I think, things like CIS benchmarks is a pretty good way to start for making sure you're setting up yourself up from success from the ground up, right? Just having a pretty simplified way of security controls that you can meet to be able to qualify some of, how you're doing from a security perspective. I think that's always good. I think NIST does a pretty good job too of conveying some how to qualify the maturity of your security program and making sure that you're appropriately assigning controls to reduce the risk that you think is most important to your organization. So, but for the most part, I don't necessarily feel that there's really any framework that is significantly better than the other. I think really the crux of it is picking a framework, adhering to it, working towards working towards a common goal, and showing that historical kind of progress while you're utilizing that framework to show that you're pushing the bar upward, right? To make sure that you're moving the needle. I think that's really what the most important thing for our framework is not necessarily, which one is the best or which one is the new, new kind of standard that everybody's adopting, but just making sure that you're using or picking one framework and showing that progress and trying to work towards, being more secure. I don't think it really matters too much in terms of what framework you are actually picking. So my advice for smaller businesses, when I started at Automox, we were only 50 employees, and I just picked one framework and have been just showing our progress throughout our journey, and that's been pretty successful.
Great advice, Chris. Well, unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Chris, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you being here. Before we close up, though, we do want to give you a chance to tell the folks at home where they can learn more about Automox and maybe how they can get started on the platform.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So you can navigate to automox.com. For those who aren't familiar with our platform, we're a cloud native solution for IT operations. And our mission is really to modernize IT systems and systems management. So we do have a free trial, so anybody can sign up with their corporate address and get a 7-day free trial to kind of utilize our platform and see how we can help really increase the speed to patching your systems and drive automation within your organization.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatchers to TWiT. We want to make sure we thank everyone who makes this show possible. It's definitely a team effort. We have the best team in the industry, starting with our co-host. That's right, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you?
You can't see me because my machine crashed and my video has decided to die. Sorry, gang. I think my weekend's going to be heading to the Apple store and seeing about buying a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, because this MacBook Pro, I think, is at the end of its lifespan.
I hear you, buddy. I hear you. Well, thank you, Cheebert, for being here. Definitely hit up Cheebert on Twitter or even over email at twit.tv if you have some show suggestions. He's taking care of all that. So thank you, Cheebert, for all your support. Folks, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin as well. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming week? Where can people find you and all your work?
Well, people can always find me talking about things over on Twitter at KG4GWA. I'm also doing stuff on LinkedIn. You're welcome to follow me over there. I've got a couple of articles coming up on dark reading. That's at the Omdia page at dark reading. We've got my research going on. first on the cybersecurity awareness training, and then later on this year, going to be taking a hard look at these risk quantification and management issues. So lots of good stuff going on. In the meantime, I'm getting ready to go over to Enterprise Connect, which is here in Orlando. Then later on, I'll be heading over to RSA. And then in the summer, it's not too early to think about the fact that we do have Black Hat and DEF CON coming up. So I'll be at all of those and would love to see members of the TWiT Riot. Let me know what you're thinking about when it comes to security. Always happy to talk security with our loyal viewers.
Thank you, Curtis. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to get your enterprise and IT goodness. We want to make it easy for you to get your show notes and your enterprise news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There we post all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, the links that we do during the show. But of course, more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications, podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, whatever, YouTube. Definitely subscribe. It's the best way to stay on top of your news as well as support the show. Plus, you may have heard, we also have Club TWiT as well. It's a members only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else. And it's only $7 a month. That's right. One of my favorite things that comes along with that is the exclusive access to the members only Discord channel. There is some amazing channels in there. Amazing characters, amazing discussions going on. I love reading through it every evening when I'm done with work. I check it out every day. It's really great. So definitely check out the Discord channel and join Club TWiT. Be part of that movement. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, Club TWiT also offers corporate group plans as well. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. The plans start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 a month, and you can add as many seats as you like. This is a great way for all the different departments, IT departments, developers, tech teams, sales departments, stay on top of our podcasts and get access to all of our podcasts. And just like regular memberships, they can join the TWiT Discord server as well and get the TWiT Plus bonus feed. So definitely check that out for your organization as well. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your friends, your family members, your coworkers with the gift of TWiT. That's right. We talk about a lot of fun tech topics on the show. I definitely think if you share it with them, they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share it with them. Now, if you've already subscribed and you're available on Friday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, we do this show live. That's right. We are live, my friends, live.twit.tv. Come see how the pizza's made. Come see the banter. Come see all my mistakes, all that fun stuff. You can make fun of me there. So definitely check that out at live.twit.tv. Now, if you can watch the show live, definitely check out the IRC channel as well. We have an infamous channel, irc.twit.tv. Some great characters in there, some reoccurring, some new people. They have a lot of great conversations and really fun topics in there. So definitely check that out and be part of the live show by being on our chat room, irc.twit.tv. Definitely hit me up on twitter.com @LewMM. I am there posting all my enterprise tidbits. I get DMs for show ideas from there, so definitely hit me up for that, as well as just having great conversation. I just love having good conversation about daily tech trends and topics that are going on there. If you want to know what's going on in my work week, you can definitely check me out at developers.office.com. There we not developers.office.com, developers.microsoft.com/office. There you can take away all the greatest and latest ways to customize the Office experience to make it more productive for you. And, just definitely check out OfficeScript as well. It's the new thing that we just put out. It's a really great way of macros recording for your Excel instances in the cloud. So definitely check that out. I do want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all their support. I also want to thank all the engineers and staff at TWiT to make this realize this and make this possible. So thank you to all of them. Of course, also thank you to Mr. Brian Chee one more time. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. That's right. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we couldn't do without him. So thank you, Cheebert, for all your support. We appreciate it, my man. And before we sign out, we also have to thank our editor, Anthony. He makes us look good after the fact. And of course, our TD for today, he's the Mr. Burke. Burke, he makes us look good during the show, and he also makes us sound wonderful as well. Burke, how are you doing? What's going on for you in the week with TWiT?
Well, once again, you caught me by surprise.
Well, you're just busy with all the shows. What are you doing? A lot of TD for shows this week?
No, just yours. But just
fantastic!
Stuff,
so we are the lucky ones to get you.
Ant's back next week.
Fantastic. Well, it was great having you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Burke. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I'm joined by Tarek Malik, the editor-in-chief over at Space.com, in our new This Week in Space podcast. Every Friday, Tarek and I take a deep dive into the stories that define the new space age. What's NASA up to? When will Americans once again set foot on the moon? And how about those samples from the Perseverance rover? When are those coming home? What the heck has Elon Musk done now? In addition to all the latest and greatest in space exploration, we'll take an occasional look at bits of spaceflight history that you probably never heard of, and all with an eye towards having a good time along the way. Check us out on your favorite podcatcher.